London, England, July 16, 1988. Wembley Stadium. The air was thick with the humidity of summer and the electricity of 72,000 people. It was a frantic, screaming energy of the Bad World Tour, a cultural tsunami that was sweeping across the globe. To the average person, this was just a concert. It was history in the making. It was the king of pop at the absolute zenith of his powers. But for a man named Elias Thorne, standing in the shadows of the loading dock, this wasn't a concert. It was a target. And tonight was the night the music was going to stop. Elias wasn't a fan. He wasn't a paparazzi photographer looking for a scoop. He was a man who had been hired by a radical fringe group that believed Western pop culture was a poison, a narcotic used to enslave the minds of the youth. They saw Michael Jackson not as a singer, but as a dangerous symbol of excess, a man who was blurring the lines of race and identity, leading a generation into what they called moral decay. Elias had been paid £50,000, a fortune in 1988, to make a statement. He had infiltrated the security team. He had the uniform. He had the credentials. And taped to the inside of his heavy combat boot, he had a serrated blade that was 6 inches long. His orders were simple but terrifying. He wasn't there to kill Michael Jackson. Killing him would make him a martyr. No, the plan was much more cruel. Elias was instructed to get close during the chaos of the backstage transition, to wait until Michael was vulnerable between songs, and to slash the superstar's face, to permanently disfigure the most famous face on the planet, to take away the image that the world worshipped. It was a mission born of pure hatred, fueled by an ideology that saw beauty as a threat. Elias had spent 3 weeks studying security protocols. He knew the shift changes. He knew the route Michael took from the quick change tent to the stage lift. He knew that for exactly 90 seconds during the costume change from Man in the Mirror, Michael would be standing alone in a narrow corridor, waiting for the cue light to turn green. That was the window. That was the kill box. As the bass line of Dirty Diana shook the concrete foundations of the stadium, Elias checked his watch. 9:42 p.m. It was time. He adjusted his security cap, lowered his head, and began to move through the labyrinth of cables and road cases. The noise was deafening. It wasn't just sound. It was physical pressure. The screaming of the crowd sounded like a jet engine taking off inside a cathedral. Elias hated it. He hated the adoration. He looked at the faces of the fans in the front rows, crying, fainting, reaching out as if Michael were a messiah. It disgusted him. False idols. Elias thought, gripping the handle of the knife through the fabric of his pant leg. Tonight, we show them that their God bleeds. He reached the designated corridor. It was dimly lit, bathed in a low blue safety light. This was the inner sanctum. The air here was cooler, smelling of ozone, hairspray, and sweat. Elias positioned himself behind a stack of massive speakers. His heart was hammering against his ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He was a professional. He had done violence before. He had hurt people before. But he had never targeted someone who felt less like a man and more like a myth. The music on stage stopped. The roar of the crowd shifted from a rhythmic chant to a confused buzz. This was the interlude. The band was playing a soft, ambient swell. Elias heard the footsteps before he saw the figure. They were fast, light, rhythmic footsteps. Then, a flurry of activity. 2 wardrobe assistants ran past, carrying the silver jacket Michael had just worn. Then, the man himself appeared. Michael Jackson turned the corner. He was smaller than Elias expected. On television, he looked 10 feet tall. Up close, he was slender, almost fragile. Soaked in sweat, his chest heaving from the exertion of the performance. He was wearing the white button-down shirt for the finale. He was alone. The security detail was at the ends of the hallway, creating a perimeter, but they had left this corridor clear to give the artist a moment to breathe. This was it. The moment Elias had planned for. The 90-second window. Elias stepped out from behind the speakers. He didn't rush. He didn't run. He walked with a confident, purposeful stride of security guard who belonged there. He closed the distance. 20 feet. 15 feet. 10 feet. Michael was looking down, adjusting the tape on his fingers, lost in a trance of focus. He didn't see the threat. He didn't see the hand reaching down toward the boot. Elias stopped 5 feet away. He reached down, his fingers brushing the hilt of the knife. He prepared to draw, to lunge, to carve his hatred into history. But then Michael looked up. In all his years of violence, in all the fights he had survived in the back alleys of London, Elias had never seen eyes like that. He expected to see arrogance. He expected to see the drug-addled glaze that the tabloids wrote about. He expected to see a man lost in his own ego. But he didn't see any of that. He saw profound, overwhelming exhaustion. And beneath the exhaustion, he saw sadness, so deep it felt like looking into a well with no bottom. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't scream for his bodyguards. He didn't step back. He simply stopped adjusting his tape and looked at Elias. The silence between them lasted for a second, but it stretched out into an eternity. The stadium outside was screaming for the king of pop, but in that hallway, there was only the sound of 2 men breathing. Elias's hand froze on his ankle. He couldn't explain it. His muscles, which were usually obedient soldiers, refused to execute the command. It wasn't fear of getting caught. It was something else. It was the way Michael was looking at him, not as a threat, not as a security guard, but as a human being. "Are you okay?" Michael asked. The voice was soft, impossibly gentle. It cut through the adrenaline in Elias's blood like a hot knife through ice. Elias blinked. The question didn't make sense. "I am here to destroy you," Elias thought. "I am here to end you." "What?" Elias grunted, his voice rough, foreign in this quiet space. "You look in pain," Michael said. He took a half-step closer. "Your eyes. You have so much pain in your eyes." Elias took a step back, his hand falling away from the hidden knife. "Stay back," he warned, his voice shaking. "You don't know me. You don't know what I am." "I know that look," Michael whispered. He tilted his head, his dark curls falling over his forehead. "I see it in the mirror every day. It's the look of someone who is running from the world, running from themselves." Elias felt a crack in his armor. This wasn't the script. Michael was supposed to be a monster, a symbol of corruption. He wasn't supposed to be this child, this intuitive, ghostly presence that seemed to read Elias's soul like a billboard. "I'm not running." Elias spat, trying to summon the anger that had fueled him for months. "I'm standing my ground. I see you. I see what you do to these people. You make them worship you. You're poison." Michael didn't get angry. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded slowly, as if Elias had said something incredibly profound. "They don't worship me," Michael said, his voice tinged with a tragic loneliness. "They worship the feeling I give them. They worship the escape. Because life is hard, isn't it? Life is so hard." Michael looked down at Elias's hands, which were clenched into fists. "Who hurt you, brother?" The question hit Elias with the force of a physical blow. Who hurt you? No one had asked him that. Not his father, who beat him when he cried. Not the gang leaders he had served. Not the radical group that had hired him. They only asked, "What can you do for us?" Or, "Who can you hurt for us?" No one. Elias lied. "I'm doing a job." "We all have jobs," Michael said. He gestured to the stage, where the lights were beginning to swirl for the finale. "My job is to make them smile so they forget their pain for 2 hours. Your job, whatever is, does it make you smile? Does it make the pain go away?" Elias looked at the knife hidden in his boot. If he used it, if he slashed this man's face, would the pain go away? Would the anger that had burned in his chest since he was a child finally extinguish? He looked at Michael's face, a face that had been scrutinized, judged, and attacked by the entire world. And yet, here he was offering empathy to an assassin. "I hate you," Elias whispered, but the conviction was gone. It was a plea, not a threat. "I'm supposed to hate you." "It's okay," Michael said. He reached out a hand, a gloved hand. He didn't touch Elias, just held it in the space between them. "You can hate me. You can hate the world. But you don't have to carry it alone. That heavy thing in your chest, you can put it down. Just for tonight. You can put it down." The cue light on the wall turned yellow. Michael had 30 seconds before he had to be on stage. The production manager shouted from the end of the hall, "Michael, 20 seconds. Michael didn't look at the manager. He kept his eyes locked on Elias. "I have to go," Michael said. "But please, don't hurt yourself trying to hurt me. It's not worth it. You're worth more than that." Michael reached into his pocket. Elias flinched, his hand darting back to his boot. Was this it? A weapon? A signal? But Michael pulled out something small. It was a towel, a simple, white towel he had used to wipe his face. He pressed it into Elias's frozen hand. "Wipe your brow," Michael said. "You're sweating. And listen, really listen to the next song. I'm singing it for you." The light turned green. Michael turned and ran. He sprinted down the hallway, bursting to the curtains and onto the stage. The roar of 72,000 people exploded again, a wall of sound that shook the floor. Elias stood alone in the hallway. He looked down at his hand. He was holding the towel. It was warm. He looked down at his boot. The knife was still there, and used. He was shaking, violent. Uncontrollable tremors racked his body. He sank to the floor, his back against the cold concrete wall. From the stage, the opening chords of Man in the Mirror began. The synthesizer melody, crystal clear and melancholic, drifted down the hallway. Elias closed his eyes. He tried to block it out. He tried to remember the mission. Slash the face. Destroy the idol. But then Michael's voice came to the monitors, clear and piercing. "I'm going to make a change. For once in my life." Elias listened. He really listened, just as Michael had asked. For the first time, he didn't hear a pop star. He didn't hear a product. He heard a man begging for redemption. He heard a man admitting that the world was broken, but that the only way to fix it was to fix himself. "I'm starting with a man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways." The lyrics tore through Elias's ideology. He had spent his life pointing fingers, blaming the system, blaming the rich, blaming the West, blaming his father. He wanted to change the world through violence, through scars. But Michael was singing about a different kind of revolution, a revolution of the heart. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. Tears, hot and stinging, leaked from Elias's eyes. He hated crying. He thought it was weakness. But he couldn't stop. The image of Michael's eyes, sad, knowing, forgiving, wouldn't leave his mind. He knew, Elias realized. He knew I was going to hurt him. He saw the hate, and he treated me like a brother anyway. Elias reached down to his boot. He ripped the tape. He pulled out the knife. The metal glinted in the blue safety light. It was an ugly thing, a tool of destruction. He looked at it, and for the first time, he saw it for what it was, a weight, a chain that he had voluntarily wrapped around his own soul. He stood up. He walked to a trash bin filled with empty water bottles and gaffer tape. He held the knife over the opening. This was his identity. This was his anger. This was his protection. "You can put it down," Michael had said, "just for tonight." Elias dropped the knife. It clattered into the bin, buried beneath the trash. He turned and walked away. He walked past the security checkpoint. He walked out of the loading dock. He walked out of Wembley Stadium, leaving the 50,000 pounds, the radical group, and his past life behind him. As he walked into the London night, the distant sound of 72,000 people singing Man in the Mirror followed him like a benediction. Elias Thorne disappeared that night. The group that hired him assumed he'd been caught or had run off with the advance money. They threatened him, they looked for him, but he was a ghost. 5 years later, in 1993, a letter arrived at Neverland Ranch. It was screened by 3 layers of security. Check for poison, scan for threats. It almost didn't make it to Michael's desk, but the return address caught the attention of a longtime assistant. It was sent from a youth rehabilitation center in Glasgow. Michael sat in his library, opening the envelope. The letter was handwritten, the penmanship rough but careful. "Dear Michael," it read, "you won't remember me. I was a security guard at Wembley in '88. I was standing in the hallway before the finale. You told me I looked in pain. You were right. I was there that night to take your face. I had a knife in my boot. I hated you because I hated myself. But you didn't call the police. You didn't run. You look me in the eye and you ask me who hurt me. You saved your own life that night, Michael. But more importantly, you saved mine. I run a center now for boys who are just like I was. Angry, violent, lost. I teach them what you taught me. That the only way to change the world is to change the man in the mirror. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Sincerely, Elias. Michael Jackson folded the letter. He sat in silence for a long time. He remembered the man. He remembered the dark energy in that hallway, the feeling of imminent danger that pricked at his skin. He had known. Of course he had known. He had lived with threats his entire life. He had developed a sixth sense for them. He knew the man wanted to hurt him. But Michael also knew that fire cannot be fought with fire. It can only be fought with water. He placed the letter in his private box of keepsakes, the ones that mattered more than the Grammys or the gold records. He walked to the window and looked out at the California night. Somewhere across the ocean, a man who once wanted to kill him was now saving children. The media called Michael Wacko Jacko. They called him eccentric. They called him out of touch. They analyzed his nose, his skin, his clothes. But they missed the magic. They thought the magic was the moonwalk. They thought the magic was the glitter glove. They were wrong. The magic wasn't that he could dance. The magic was that he could look at a man holding a knife and see a brother holding a burden. The magic was that he could turn an assassin into a healer with a single question. Who hurt you? Elias Thorne never gave an interview. He never sold his story to the tabloids, even when they offered millions for dirt on Jackson. He kept the secret until his death. But in the common room of his youth center in Glasgow, there's a framed photo on the wall. It's not a photo of Michael Jackson. It's a photo of a simple white towel framed behind glass. Underneath it, there's a plaque with no name, just a quote. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. Years later, after Michael passed away in 2009, a vigil was held in London. Thousands of fans gathered, lighting candles, singing the songs, crying for the loss of the legend. At the back of the crowd, an older man stood watching. He didn't have a glove. He didn't have a poster. He just had a quiet peace in his eyes. A young reporter, looking for a soundbite, approached him. "Sir, were you a fan? Did you ever see him perform?" The man smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I saw him perform the greatest act of his life," the man said, "but it wasn't on a stage, and there was no audience." "What was it?" the reporter asked, sensing a story. The man shook his head. "It was just a moment between two men, in a hallway. One was a king, and the other was a fool, and the king stepped down from his throne to save the fool." The man turned and walked away, disappearing into the London fog, leaving the reporter confused. The world remembers the music. The world remembers the scandals. The world remembers the tragedy. But the universe remembers the truth. The universe remembers that on a hot night in July 1988, hate walked into a hallway armed with a knife, and love disarmed it with a whisper. And that is the hidden legacy of Michael Jackson. It isn't found in the sales figures or the charts. It is found in invisible spaces where he touched lives that no one else wanted to touch. It is found in the quiet miracles that happened when the cameras were off. As you listen to this, ask yourself the question Michael asked Elias. Who hurt you? And more importantly, are you ready to put that burden down? Because if a man can drop a knife and pick up a purpose, then there is hope for all of us. There is hope for the man in the mirror.